Honey, where did the road go?
Hell if I know. Wait a minute. Is that Seriah Azkath?
It must be episode 47 of the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. Welcome to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. Coming to you from the glacial dumping grounds known as the Michigan Basin. I'm Michelle.
And I am Wayne.
And we are a Michigan-based husband and wife educator and podcasting duo that after having a UFO sighting in March of 2018 have started to examine UFOs and other paranormal topics within Michigan and beyond.
Topics include UFOs, the paranormal, conspiracy theories, ghosts, alternative history and archaeology, cryptids, and all things strange and paranormal. So sit back, grab a drink, and come along with us on this journey down the paranormal rabbit hole. All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Hello, everyone. It is the weekend.
Absolutely. And welcome to episode 47 of the podcast. This is being released on February 11th, 2023. So, Michelle, here we are back again for another episode at the beginning of season 3. And you know what this podcast does.
It is the only podcast that takes you down the rabbit hole on an escalator.
Of course.
Oh, remember, After the Cast Live coming to you next Saturday, February 18th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook to talk about the latest interview, UFOs, cryptids, the paranormal, and of course, your comments. Make sure to mark your calendar and check it out.
You know, Michelle, those live shows are a lot of fun, especially getting to interact with all the people that come into our chat room. It's really fun.
It is. We've got some great regulars that come on the show. So, and plus, we want those new folks to join as well. Come join the conversation.
Absolutely.
So, speaking of conversations and stories, if you have a story you would like to tell, we would like to talk to you. You can reach out to us at mi.ufo.podcast@gmail.com. Send us a brief summary of your experience and we'll contact you to discuss things further and try to get you or your story on the podcast.
Yeah, it's always great to hear from you guys. And we're actually starting to hear from some person. I'm not going to release their name, but they are sending us...
we'll call him Sam.
Okay, Sam has been sending us some videos of late of some UFO and paranormal activity, which looks amazing. So after we review some of this stuff and we talk to him further, we may be airing some of this on our live stream. So not sure exactly when, but just to let everybody know, we are working on that and we'll get back with you soon. Kind of a cliffhanger.
We've got something coming soon.
We do. And last night, February 9th, 2023, I was a guest on the YouTube channel Not Aliens, which is hosted by one of our former guests on this podcast, Jared Murphy, and also now a friend of ours. And it's hosted by Jared Murphy and the great Jim Goodall. And we talked about the thing we've been working on for a while here, and that is the expedition that is going to do the preliminary investigation down to Belize because we were tipped off to 2 undiscovered pyramids down in the country of Belize. And so we have put together a first team, basically a first team for contact, and it's currently being assembled for this trip, and it's going to be a very exciting time. And the discovery is surely going to cause waves in the ancient history world. So the first team right now consists of scientists, documentarians, explorers, LiDAR operators, and the like. I, unfortunately, will not be joining the initial exploration because I have other commitments for other trips this year.
And it's called He'll Be in the Classroom.
That too. However, we are looking for people to join the team that can lend knowledge to this site. So anybody that's got skills and knowledge in exploration, mapping, those kind of things, we're definitely looking for more people that want to go. So we are also looking for some financial backers to help plan more expeditions and get this discovery out to the world. So if you are interested in joining the team in either capacity, you can contact me at mi.ufo.podcast@gmail.com or Jared Murphy at notaliensitsus@gmail.com. And anything you send to me in regards to this expedition and the teams that we're putting together for this, I will forward that along to Jared as well. So come and help out. This is going to be amazing, undiscovered territory, man. So I don't know, Michelle, it's awesome.
Well, and our own shout out too. If you would also like to help support the podcast, stay active, look in the show description for our link tree and click on that. There are so many options linked in there to keep the research and the conversation going. So just check out our link tree after the show.
And also a quick shout out to our patron, Hava H, who is a continuing supporter of the podcast. And it's with people like Hava out there that are helping us keep things going and getting involved in all kinds of things. So thank you very much, Hava. And if you want to help support the podcast, there's many different ways to do it. Hit that link tree down below in the show notes.
Yeah. Speaking of giving a shout out, I think it's time. I think we need to go grab some dinner before we continue this show from our favorite local diner.
Hey, baby. It's New Boston Coney and Grill.
Oh my gosh. Traveling near New Boston, Michigan? Hungry? Well then, you need to check out New Boston Coney and Grill tucked away at 37005 Huron River Drive. With daily specials, homemade soups and desserts, and a staff that makes you feel like family, you will not be disappointed. Give them a try for dine-in or carry-out at 734-606-5313. You can find their page, including their menu, on Facebook. Bon appetit!
Well, after that delicious meal, Michelle, I think it's that time.
It's time for What's in the News.
Yeah, baby, I just got done eating. What is in the news?
Coming from Wired. Spotted a UFO? Well, there's an app for that. Enigma Labs launches a project to crowdsource and quantify data about unidentified aerial phenomena. So the tech startup Enigma Labs wants to turn UFO sightings into data science. So is this saying, government, you're not doing your job, so here, let's be this outsourced company that does our own thing?
All I'm going to add to that is there's some shady things going on with this, and that's about all I know at this point. So I know Richie over at Goof on Radio's got a very strong opinion about this. I haven't dug personally into the whole Enigma Labs as to who they are or what they are. But yeah, let's just see what the article is. Maybe everybody can put the app on their phone.
Previously, people who had seen strange lights darting around the sky could do no more than tell their friends or call intelligence agencies. Soon, anyone with a smartphone will be able to use an app to report an unexplainable event as it happens, like a plane going overhead. Enigma Labs mobile app was released today. So initially on an invitation-only basis as they work out the bugs, although they plan to make it available to the wider public. For now, it'll be a free to download and use, although the company could later charge for additional features. The company will not just be amassing new data. It has already gobbled up data on around 300,000 global sightings over the past century and included them in their system. And while their data set will be available to the public, their algorithms for assessing it will not.
Ooh, really interesting. By the way, this was written and posted January 31st, 2023. So
At our core, we're a data science company. So this is in quotes. We're building the first data and community platform exclusively dedicated to the study of unidentified anomalous phenomena, says Mark Douglas, Chief Operating Officer of the New York-based company.
So how do they explain the MUFON reports that have been going on for years and the National UFO Reporting Center? They've been doing this for years, and they only oh, wait a minute. I see what they're doing here. The unidentified anomalous phenomenon. So they just changed the name. So they officially are collecting the first data sets. Very well done.
I don't know. People need to look at this article. The app is like, what was the shape? Was it a light? Was it a circle, a sphere, a triangle, a disc? It's got literally 12 different choices of what shape you saw. Anyhow, part of their goal is to reduce the stigma of reporting something unexplainable, even if the viewer doesn't actually think it's visiting aliens. For the record, some government agencies and companies like Enigma Labs now use the term UAPs instead of UFOs. So, unidentified anomalous phenomena.
And it used to be aerial phenomena.
I was going to say, now we're going with the third item, rather than unidentified flying objects. The change is meant to encompass a broad range of objects that might not have an extraterrestrial origin and to make the terminology sound less pejorative. Identifying an unknown and distant object or explaining a phenomenon one has never seen before poses a unique challenge. Nevertheless, the app asks users structured questions like when and where in the sky the user saw something and approximately what shape the object had. It also gives them space to tell their sighting story and provide more details, and they can upload a photo or a video. It's a bit like citizen science projects in which volunteers help classify telescope images of galaxies, but in this case, the images are submitted by volunteers, and most of the classification is done by an algorithm.
Well, they just released an update to this just like 30 seconds ago, and one of the questions they ask is, did you do any TikTok videos of a dance challenge with an alien?
Oh, okay. So the company wants to do more than just...
am I wrong?
No, okay, so the company wants to do more than just ingest lots of data, though. They want to apply their proprietary models to rule out things that are not UAPs.
Stepping good.
Such as by determining whether there's lightning or unclassified aircraft nearby. And they want to filter the credibility of the data sources as well, distinguishing between high credible military pilots, trained observers with, corroboration from multiple sensors, and then at the opposite end of the spectrum, a single witness who maybe had a few drinks too many and saw a point of light in a sky, Douglas says.
Stepping good.
So we can have fun being by the airport, just start reporting everything that we see.
Yep.
There's a Delta flight, there's Spirit, there's
that
Frontier.
Looks like a wing shape to me.
There's a wing shape. Oh, it's a chevron. It's a chevron.
Every time a plane flies over to land at Detroit Metro, we have to do a little dance.
It's like, if your name is Jim, Joe, Bob, you're not a credible witness. But if you're a sergeant...
All right, Michelle, calm down and get back to this.
The core issue to studying this has been a data problem. What is credible, what is not, who is credible, who is not, he argues. What we're trying to do is bring a level of standardization and rigor to that. Oh God.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Oh, as a teacher, we already hear the word rigor enough. Okay, so of course, the challenge will be applying scientific standardization to something that might not be scientific at all. Eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable, and people interpret what they see based on factors like current events and their scientific, political, and cultural backgrounds. The data you're getting is socially constructed, says University of Pennsylvania historian Kate Dorsch. who specializes in scientific knowledge production.
All right, we'll leave that one alone.
UFO sightings began as an American obsession following World War II and the Roswell incident in 1947, when people in New Mexico found mysterious debris that may or may not have come from a crashed military balloon. Sightings quickly spread across most of the world, Dorsch says, and interest in Roswell, as well as the US's and USSR's nascent space programs, may have encouraged people to think of lights in the sky as alien technology. But, she continues, there were fewer UFO sightings after the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik satellite in 1957. When people saw something weird in the sky, they chalked it up as a human-made spacecraft. And the geopolitics of where you live matters too. Today, she says, when Germans witness strange phenomenon, they often attribute them to Russian and American-made craft. When you're looking for something in particular, that is what you'll see, she says. Government agencies have also been interested in reports of UFOs for national security reasons, since sightings of flying saucers might actually be sightings of a rival secret aircraft. Or if the craft was actually the nation's own classified project, descriptions of the sighting might reveal how it appears to others.
Yeah, so it says here, agencies within the U.S. government have expressed renewed interest in UAPs over the past several years. The Pentagon released a report in June 2021, assessing 144 incidents witnessed by military pilots dating back to 2004. Only one of which investigators could thoroughly explain. Last May, the House of Representatives held a hearing on UAPs at which government and defense officials spoke about the report and the national security and flight safety issues it raised. Last year, the Defense Department also formed a new organization, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, to coordinate efforts to detect, identify, and attribute objects of interest near military areas. They're already getting UFO reports.
Scott Bray, Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, who spoke at the House hearing, says that the frequently reported presence of unauthorized or unidentified aircraft is a safety and security concern. Airspace is increasingly cluttered with balloons, drones, quadcopters, UAVs, and the list goes on. So especially when you consider the improvements in sensors, it's no surprise that we have an increase in UAP reports, wrote Bray in an email to Wired. This makes the destigmatization, reporting standardization, the data management work done by the UAP task force all the more critical, because these are the keys to being able to distinguish between an errant balloon and a foreign intelligence or other type of threat to national security.
Kind of like that balloon they blew up the other day.
Yeah. I
wonder how many millions of dollars it took to shoot a missile into a balloon when the pilot could have just flew by and dropped a pin on it.
And in October, NASA announced a 9-month independent study to figure out how data from government and commercial groups,
money,
somebody's getting paid, could be used to shed light on UAPs and what the agency could do in the future to analyze data from sightings. A NASA spokesperson declined an interview, but said the agency will have an update on the study this spring. Enigma Labs also isn't the only private UFO-related effort. The company To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, co-founded by Blink-182 guitarist Tom DeLonge, employs scientists and former government employees to bring UFO research, sometimes called ufology, into the mainstream. Dorsch says that no matter who is collecting the data, she hopes these groups will engage with users transparently and in good faith by not exploiting their data for financial gain or making people feel disrespected. I believe that the overwhelming number of people who have seen a UFO have had an experience that they cannot explain, she says. The UFO community deserves to be taken seriously. I agree with her 100% on that last statement.
Yeah, I do too, but there's something fishy about this, and people take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, once you start getting into this can get really, really messy.
Yeah, I don't even think the TTSA is even around anymore, or if it is, it's like way on the fringe, because I don't know, Lou Elizondo and all those guys left the TTSA. So anyways, I don't know, people, you guys be the judge.
I don't know. I'm going to get the app and go stand by the airport. coffee in hand. I'm just going to click away. Everything's a chevron.
But that's what people will end up doing. Anyways, don't do that. If you're listening to this, don't do that. Okay. Let's
totally sabotage and mess with that app.
Stop it, Michelle. All right. Well, that was an interesting news article. I think we should now just get ready to jump into this interview with Seriah Azkath of Where Did the Road Go? So, Michelle, why don't you tell us a little bit about Seriah before we jump into this interview?
So Seriah has been studying the unknown for over 30 years and is currently working on a couple of books about it. His studies have spanned the world of the unexplained. UFOs and lost civilizations have been a strong focus throughout, but he has delved into most subjects involved in this work. He has also had a lifetime of strange experiences. He has been in radio for over 25 years, hosting a heavy metal-based show called The Last Exit for the Lost.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please help us welcome to the podcast for the first time, veteran paranormal and UFO podcaster, Seriah Azkath. Seriah, thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, absolutely.
This is great. I first, and my wife and I, we were kind of talking backstage a little bit, are kind of new to this. This is only like our third year starting, into this. And it started with our experience, which a lot of our audience already knows about. So I'm not going to jump all the way back into that. But I had heard you a couple times on the Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and the last one you did was with Marty.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. I think I've listened to it now like 2 or 3 times, and I've got all of his UFO series saved, and he even talked to the Snake Bros about Michelle and I's experience, because we had them on our show when we first started. Our first year, they came on and talked with us, and still want to get them back on. But man, that was a great conversation. And I'm like listening to you talking about, well, Dimmu Borgir behind me is a death metal band. This over here, and I'm like, wait a minute, how come I don't know this dude, man? Because it was like, he's talking my language. He's, I'm waiting for him to talk about Emperor and Cannibal Corpse and all this stuff, and I was like, man, that's really cool. So, man, again, thank you for joining us. This is an honor and a privilege for us. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely.
Michelle's supposed to ask you the first question.
He doesn't tell me these things. He just kind of points, snaps, and it's like, woman, you ask question.
Bunga bunga. Let's go.
So, Seriah, as a veteran of podcasting in the realm of the fringe and the high strangeness, paranormal, etc., can you give our audience a brief look into who Seriah Azkath is and how did you get involved in all of this?
Oh, God.
That's a big open-ended question. Yeah. This is where my students right now would go, how many sentences do I need to write?
It's more, how can I shorten this to a palatable bit? I've been in radio for almost 29 years doing a metal show. And back in like 2012, the short version is I hated talk radio because my dad used to listen to Rush Limbaugh religiously. Drove me nuts. So I just hated talk radio in general, but I really started getting into Graham Hancock stuff when I discovered him. And he had posted he was going to be on Coast to Coast. And I'm like, well, I don't like talk radio, but I really want to hear Graham Hancock talk. And so I tuned in and listened to the whole thing. I'm like, okay, apparently I just don't like Rush Limbaugh because I loved listening to that. And so I started digging up more of his Coast to Coast appearances and so on and so forth. And then looking at other shows. There weren't a billion shows out back then. This was like 2010, 2011. And finally was hearing some, I mean, some of them were good, but I was hearing one where the host is getting to talk to all these cool people, and they don't even know anything. They're barely paying attention to the conversation. I'm like, I want to talk to these people. These are the people I want, and you don't seem to care, and that's frustrating. So I said, can I do this? I figured, well, I'm already in the radio station. Let me ask at the radio station. And initially they didn't respond to me. And I thought, yeah, you didn't like that idea, did you? And then someone went, no, it sounds like a good idea. I asked them again. So I asked the program director again. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, I love this idea. When do you want to start? And I was like, oh, now I actually have to put something together. So I didn't know what I was starting with. If it was just going to be a few of my friends and I talking about this stuff. I happened to hear Jim Elvich on Coast to Coast, and he had written a book called The Universe Solved about simulation theory. And I was like, oh, I really like this guy. This seems he would be a great first guest. And it turns out he went to Cornell and was familiar with the radio station I'm at. So he was more than happy to come on and do the first show. And that just pushed me in the direction of doing mostly interviews for the first couple of years. But yeah, so it's like that's the very short abbreviated version. It was just kind of a thing. The first person I ever interviewed, I actually interviewed on my metal show. I had Walter Cruttendon on, who wrote The Lost Star of Myth and Time, because I really, really liked the book. And I talked to him about it. And he said, yeah, I'll do this. And, we got done. And I was nervous through the whole thing. And I got done. I'm like, how was it? He's like, that was great. You should definitely do this as a show. And I went, okay, all right.
Sold. Yeah, awesome. Well, with my wife and I were new to this, and then I heard you on the Snake Brothers of the Serpent, or the Snake
Right.
Bros. And I was like, I need to find out more about you. And so I went on your website. And so I want to kind of kick things off a little bit by reading something to our audience. And this is a section off of your website, the About section. And it says, where did the road go? Aims to go deeper than your average fringe-aimed talk show. We ask hard questions without being overtly confrontational. We support the work of our guest. We want to bring their ideas and research to as wide an audience as possible, while also viewing it as in many directions as possible. We are not interested in wild speculation, although some speculation can be fun and constructive. We seek out the most interesting researchers and avoid the pop culture that is so overexposed today. As a result, you will hear from some people that you would not have heard otherwise. We cover the paranormal in all its forms: ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, cryptids, psychic abilities, etc. We heavily explore lost civilizations, which I'm very into, in many directions. We talk of cataclysms and the cycle of ages. And I find this extremely well said, and just an overall beautiful statement that encapsulates what I think the podcasting and what Michelle and I actually try to do. So can you talk about what really made you go this direction with the podcast? And just as a side note to everybody, this statement is just a small section of the About, where you go into more detail about what you guys and yourself you're doing with your show.
Yeah.
But I read that, and I was taken back by about how well thought out and welcoming that was for a show.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the stuff, and it's even more prevalent now, where you just get this sensationalistic nonsense perpetrated everywhere. And you get these people who are telling you exactly what's going on, even though they can't prove anything. Like, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in what's actually going on. I don't have like a preset agenda that I'm trying to kind of hit, like it's not, I'm looking for as many answers as we can find, but generally what you find is better questions that kind of narrow down what's going on. So my whole thing was to pull in these people who were original thinkers, people like Joshua Cutchin and such, who, had a different way of looking at this stuff that other people hadn't. Greg Bishop's another great example of that. But it was those people that I talked to and be like, okay, I want you to be heard by more people, because people need to think about this. If they're really interested in it, they need to think about this in a much more complex way. It's not as simple as, oh, Bigfoot's an undiscovered ape. Well, there might be. There might be an undiscovered ape out there, but most Bigfoot accounts are probably not of an undiscovered ape unless sensationalize it and cut away all the other stuff that doesn't fit the description of undiscovered ape. And, just like UFOs being extraterrestrial, it's not impossible, certainly, but it's also not the most likely scenario based on everything we know. So I just like to bring in people who were thinking differently, looking at things differently, were able to kind of keep their biases out of it as much as possible and just be, intellectually honest in what they were dealing with. And there wasn't a lot of that around back then. That's the other thing. There were only a handful of shows that fit that description. Most of them were very, very sensationalistic, very, oh, here's a spooky story. Here's this. It wasn't delving into any kind of depth of anything.
Yeah, well said. And, one of the things that I've found too is that there are these people out there now. I don't know where you would classify them. If you don't have some kind of evidence, your story's not good enough. So
Right.
they're super skeptics or debunkers. And I know you had mentioned something about that on your website as
Yeah.
well.
Well,
Can you dig into that a little bit?
yeah. I mean, the idea of a skeptic is someone who asks questions. You don't just accept the first thing that comes along. You keep questioning. People who call themselves skeptics, like professional skeptics, they're not skeptics. They already have their mind made up that this stuff doesn't exist. So they're just looking for whatever explanation, however ridiculous it might be, to explain it away, move the goalposts, etc. There was Dr. Bem, who worked in Cornell, did some experiments with precognition, and he was able to show that people would react to images of sex or violence before the computer even chose the random image. And this was pretty consistent. Like you would see the response in their brains. And, initially it was dismissed as, oh, well, the machines must have been off or whatever, because there was only a few milliseconds. But still, it shouldn't have happened a few milliseconds before the computer chose the image. And the reason those images in particular is because they create a very strong reaction in most people's brains. It lights up. So
almost like a precognition?
Right. So they were reacting to it before it was shown. And his research was duplicated. It was peer reviewed. It was completely accepted as much as they didn't want to accept it. And a lot of these skeptics were like, oh, well, if that's the case, maybe the way we're doing science is wrong because we know this isn't true. So instead of accepting the data based on what we've accepted as scientific evidence for, a century or two, now suddenly they're like, well, we're going to just change the rules because we know it's not true.
Yeah. So that's just a denier. I mean,
yeah, and
they're denying the data.
It's like a religion to them of this is how things are. It's dogmatic. It's not, and I don't care about those people. Honestly, when someone says you have to prove it to me, I'm like, no, I don't. You can believe whatever you want. I don't care. It doesn't change what's really out there.
I was listening to a show recently that you had on. It was your December 17th, 2022 show. And the reason I'm asking this is because we recently had on, as our season 2 finale, we had on Kathy Martin, who came on our show, and she talked about her aunt and uncle, which everybody probably knows at this point is Betty and Barney Hill, and their abduction experience. And she was telling us about the evidence of their traumatic abduction and stuff that went on. But one of your guests was speaking about how many intelligence personnel were
Ren.
connected to this case.
Yep, Ren Collier.
Yeah. So do you know much about that?
I don't, and I actually plan to have him come on to talk about it more because I know that I know like the guy who hypnotized them had some intelligence connections. I think we talked about it briefly on the UFO history show, which will be the one that goes public probably tonight or tomorrow.
Okay.
And that's, I think Mike Cleland said, yeah, he had some intelligence connections, but they weren't anything that would have compromised, like he wasn't a spook or anything. So I don't know. I got to talk to Ren more and have him come back on and talk about it because I'm not overly familiar with that.
Yeah, this was the first I heard of it. I mean, I've heard of things like the CIA has, an agent in every radio, news station, or
Oh yeah.
these kind of things going on.
There-
But
there-
this was the first I heard specifically about the Betty and Barney Hill and people working around them being involved.
Yeah, it's not actually new. He just went a little further with it.
Okay.
I can't remember who wrote the book. Was it Fuller?
Yeah, I don't remember who he said because it was, like you said, a short little blurb, but it stood
Yeah.
out to me because we had, like I said, we had Kathy Martin on, and I was like, oh, okay, this sounds really interesting, because I was going to follow up with you about some of these ideas that are circulating in the UFO field about this is basically UFOs have been a psyop since like 47. And I was curious about what your thoughts are on that, because there have been UFO sightings before 1947.
Sure. And that's why Jacques Vallée and Chris Albrecht went back and did like their whole book, something in the sky. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but it was all cases pre like 1900. And it's a full book of UFO sightings pre 1900. It's not the thing about any of this stuff is it's been seen cross culture throughout written history in every culture. So something's going on. Now, that doesn't mean it's actually what we think it is, but there's something that are causing people to have these experiences, and they seem to be a very human experience. Now, as far as disinfo, I think very early on, the government started playing into that in order to hide things. They came out, a couple of years ago, saying some of the reports from airline pilots of UFOs in the 1950s, very specific ones, were actually of one of their spy planes, but they only released that now. So they've used UFOs to cover secret projects for a very long time. They have infiltrated UFO groups. Jacques Vallée has a great book on that called Messengers of Deception.
Yep, I have that book sitting on my nightstand. I'm still trying to get to it. I've got so many books piled up, man. But then what is it? Passport to Magonia?
Yeah.
I've got that one sitting there too. So
I actually like Dimensions more than Passport. Passport was important because it was the first book that tied the fairy faith to modern UFO reports, showing the similarity.
And it's so funny that you say that, because if I pull up my audiobooks that I just recently purchased, Dimensions is the one I just recently got. So I have 3 of his books here in the house.
Dimensions expands on that and shows the similarities of a lot of other stuff going on as well, that we all that is probably from a similar source, isn't necessarily extraterrestrial, but shows the commonalities across multiple different points of weirdness. And that's what I really liked about Dimensions, and also touches on the fairy faith. It kind of like recaps Gateway or Passport to Magonia. But yeah, Messengers of Deception talks about the UFO group stuff. I mean, you had things like Greg Bishop's Project Beta is a good example of disinfo and stuff. He talked, I forget the guy's name, but he talks, about a lot of the disinfo in there it was told to him straight by one of the people who was a disinfo agent. There's a great documentary too that's escaping.
Was that Doherty? Was that his
Doty?
name?
Yep,
Doty.
Yep. And there are things like the Project Serpco. I think it's Serpco, very similar to Serpco, whatever it was called, where they were feeding these releases, leaking these releases to this guy and telling them to publish them publicly. And he was like spell checking them and fixing them because they had grammatical errors and spelling errors. And the people who were giving them to him were like, stop doing that. And he's like, but they're wrong. And he's like, that's how they need to be released, because they were codes for spies. Disguised as UFO as UFO leaks.
Interesting. Sound like the old days. What was it? The number stations they used to have going.
Yep. So those
things were creepy.
Yes, they were. They still exist, I think.
Yeah.
So they were posting these things, to communicate with spies, and when he changed them, he was changing the code.
Dudes ending up. They're out there operating and doing something completely different that they're not supposed to be doing.
This code.
Why do they want me to buy a cheeseburger today? Oh, that's so weird.
So yeah, I mean that there's tons of government disinfo mixed in with this stuff most of the way along. Like, I suspect that Roswell was not so much. I think whatever happened in Roswell was probably related to our government. And they either told the guy, oh, just say it's a UFO, or he just thought it was a UFO because he didn't recognize what he was looking at. And then they pulled it back, and then it disappeared until, the 1980s when the MJ6 documents, were released, which also weren't real documents.
Michelle wanted to ask something here.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of wild things like government, Wayne and I were talking about this. He had brought it up, but I want your take on it. What is the idea behind a wilderness poltergeist?
Oh, so that was something I actually came up with. So I was reading Illuminations, and I always forget the guy's name who wrote it, but I had him on the show, and his idea was that some UFO flaps, where you have areas with lots of UFO activity, could be similar to mass poltergeist activity. And this struck me, and I'm like, oh my God. And I started thinking about other things. And when people go Bigfoot hunting, they'll get stones thrown at them. They'll get vocalizations. They'll hear mimicry, all the same stuff you get in poltergeist encounters. And it just struck me that, oh my God, they're actually creating their own poltergeist encounters, but it looks like an ape rather than a ghost because they're in the woods. That's what they're expecting it to look like. And it's coming from them, or at least the energy is coming from them. Joshua Cutchin was the one that said, oh, so a wilderness poltergeist. And we were like, oh yeah, no, that's perfect. But it's like you're going out into the woods, you're getting away from all the signals and stuff that normally block out, that they're inundated with when you're in cities and stuff. So you're getting out there, you're connecting to nature better. This stuff might just generate better, especially when you're, in a more intense sort of setting where you're going, okay, we're going to find Bigfoot, Most people who go Bigfoot hunting do not see an ape. They hear and see things that are basically poltergeist activity.
That's interesting. So you're thinking, and it sounds like some of your guests as well, that these may be manifested by the people going out there.
Right. And it could be that something picks up on that energy. I mean, the thing with poltergeists, there's certainly cases that look like it is just coming from a particular person. But I think it's hard to say that it's that person causing it. It very well could be. But the other possibility is there's something else out there that can draw from that energy. But again, if you go out expecting an ape, your poltergeist is going to resemble an ape, not a ghost.
Well, it's kind of the same thing, isn't it, with like UFOs and seeing aliens and they look differently. And there's ideas out there that, and I kind of think about this as well, that they have a way of manipulating our perceptions. Have you run into this, and so, what's your thoughts?
I think that whatever this other is not something we have a I'm trying to think of the right word for it. Like we don't have any reference frame for it. So we're dealing with something that, like when you look at something, your brain automatically compares it to other things to try and figure out what it is. Mm-hmm. So I think these things we're encountering are so different that our brain just goes, I don't know what that is. And so it has to sort of put a face on it. I mean, what you're seeing when you look around is very little of what's actually in your environment. Your brain is like a massive filter, taking most of the stuff it figures isn't important out. This may also explain why some people will see something and the person standing right next to them doesn't in some cases. Because one person's brain says, I don't know what that is, but it's there. And the other person's brain goes, I don't know what it is. It's not important. I'm not even going to let you know it's there. There's a fantastic book on perception called The Invisible Gorilla that talks about a bunch of experiments, psychological experiments they did to show us just how unreliable our senses actually are.
Oh, dude, I use that with my 9th grade students. I put the video up.
Oh, the video, yeah.
And tell them to count how many times the basketball's being passed around and the guy in the ape suit walks right through the middle and not a single one sees them.
And people will get angry sometimes.
Yes.
When they did it, they're like, well, it's a different video when you show them again. And it's like, no, it's just, they call it the illusion of focus or something like that. Because when you're focused on something, you're excluding the stuff around it.
Yeah. Tunnel vision.
But the book, I mean, that's just a small sliver of all the different experiments they did in the book. And, memory, as they put it, memory is a combination of what actually happened, how you interpreted what happened, and how you feel about what happened.
Well, have you, it's interesting that you say that. And as I think about this more, I've got some ideas running in my head, because I am pretty good friends with Jared Murphy, who is the author of Not Aliens, Worse It's Us, kind of debunking the ancient aliens idea, but really saying that, the earth is basically a computer that is in a standby mode, and that, all of the earth was connected at some point until there was a massive cataclysm, not the end of the Younger Dryas, but the eruption of the supervolcano Mount Toba in Indonesia. And he said that, Graham Hancock talks about Terra Preta being, very important in the, the biochar in the Amazon. But his research has taken him all around the world, and wherever he finds people that are very creative, like Elon Musk, certain businesses and things like that, you find concentrations of Terra Preta in those areas, like Minnesota. There's been so many businesses started and huge companies, and those people are very, very smart. South Africa, lots of Terra Preta down there. And my thoughts have been kind of, what if
I didn't realize Terra Preta was found outside of South America.
Yes. Yeah. That's why I find fascinating about his stuff. And it also seems to be in areas where they have, and he's a builder by trade. He's kind of like Randall Carlson in a way. And he wants to go underneath a lot of these pyramids and seeing what structures, like those gigantic stone spheres that you find on islands and things. His ideas are those are for counteracting earthquake seismic waves. And he thinks
heard that before.
Yeah, and he thinks that those, you'll find a lot of those things down underground. That's how these giant megalithic structures have survived for so long. But I mean, regardless, if I put that and say, okay, Terra Preta, let's say somebody's out looking for Bigfoot and they happen to come across Terra Preta, they don't realize they're on it, and they tap into this energy of the planet that can actually make this stuff happen. And then I'm thinking as well, I don't know if you're familiar with the people that are doing the psychedelic research, and how the psychedelic drugs don't speed your mind up. They slow it down so that you are more aware of all the different things in the environment. And that's like what is it, ayahuasca and things like that do. It slows you down so that you see a totally different world, and people are seeing these same images of these entities and things. So I'm wondering if there's a combination that could be manifesting these types of these visions. Or
environment definitely has a lot to do with it. Like I said, just even getting out in nature away from all the electromagnetic interference, but also fault lines. Paul Devereaux has shown that so many UFO sightings come along fault lines. There's earthquake lights, of course, but actual full out UFO sightings, not just earthquake lights. Who was I talking to? Greg Little said that Devereaux and one of his partners, they were looking at one of the Marian apparitions in Egypt, and they said every time this apparition appeared, there was an earthquake happening within 200 miles of it.
Yeah, I believe that was in their Origin of the Gods.
It is, yes.
Yeah, because I had Greg Little on as well, and we were talking about that. And yeah, that was very fascinating stuff. And didn't they say that they were seeing this pretty regularly? Like,
Yes.
yeah, very fascinating stuff. And so it just makes me wonder, like, the Earth is just a gigantic power plant of mysticism. I don't know. I don't even know what to think anymore. I mean, especially as an Earth and space science teacher, you know, I'm coming into all these things, and I think about the questions I asked my professors when I was in college and couldn't get a straight answer. And now I'm seeing a lot of this stuff, and then I discovered Graham Hancock, Randall Carlson. I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah. I what was the other thing? Oh, and you also have to factor in solar activity. Robert Schoch did a study showing that he took all laboratory tests of psychics and such over the last 100 years and showed that their results were consistently better during high solar activity than during low solar activity.
What type of solar activity was it? Was it just like CMEs or?
Yeah, like sunspots, things like that.
Sunspot. Okay.
So
that's real interesting.
The more active the sun is, the more likely psychics were to score higher on their laboratory tests. As he put it, either there's a conspiracy that's been going on for over 100 years of psychics to only do well, only to fake good results during high solar activity, or the psychics are real and the solar activity has an effect on it.
Or maybe people don't realize they're psychic, and then these things happen, and then all of a sudden
everyone has that ability.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, people in deja vu, right? I mean, it's like, ooh, you know, but maybe there's some kind of solar activity going on at the time that's those energy waves, whatever they may be, coming from the sun is doing something to your brain.
And Walter Cruttenton, the first guy I interviewed there, he in his book he talks about how we're actually in a binary star system, and that's what drives the cycle of the ages, the golden, the great year in the Greek philosophy, and the Yuga cycle in the Indian philosophy or Hindu philosophy, and how his belief is that it's Sirius that's moving in a binary relationship with us, and that as Sirius gets closer, we start developing these higher abilities that we had in the golden ages of these great years, which is what's described, that people are more psychic, they have all these almost superhuman abilities. And you know, I looked at that and then looked at Robert Schoch's work and went, well, if one sun is doing this to us, what would a second sun coming close to our solar system do to us?
Well, now that makes me think, is it the Dogons, the Dogon tribe?
Yeah, they talk about Sirius B. Yeah.
Well, they knew stuff about Sirius or the stars around it or the planet, whatever it is.
They knew about Sirius B before they had any reason to know about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. See, all this stuff starts to tie together once you start to like throw some pieces down and seeing what they look like.
And Laird Scranton has shown that the Dogon had a very sophisticated cosmology that also ties into early Buddhist and early Judaic teaching, suggesting they all kind of came from the same place.
That's right.
As well as early Egyptian, but the Egyptian Dogon tie is fairly clear.
Now, is it the Dogon that paint their body with that one symbol that you also find now on the back of the moai on Easter Island as well? And like
I don't know.
Also, okay, Göbekli Tepe. There's like some type of a symbol. And man, I wish I had that stuff written down, but I just recently was, you know, looking into Laird Scranton and his ideas, and I saw that he was on Brothers of the Serpent as well. So I was like, oh man, I gotta listen to this one. You know, there's not enough time in a day, and time's a resource we never get back, I swear.
Yes. Yeah,
so,
I've had Laird on quite a few times.
Oh, okay.
Really, really awesome guy.
Yeah, I would love to talk to him about this, but I also want to know more about it because I think there is some kind of a tie between the symbols if we want to talk about ancient civilizations, that's like my main thing that I'm really into, other than UFOs, because of what Michelle and I went through. I think we could find that there was some type of a common civilization based on some of the symbols and symbology that we're seeing. What does Graham Hancock call those? The handbags?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Those kind of symbols that appear in Göbekli Tepe. They're in Central America, South America. Very fascinating stuff.
Yeah, well, you definitely have that tale of basically the civilizers, of these advanced people who came in and after the end of the last ice age and taught people a lot of useful skills and then moved on.
Hey everyone, we hope you're enjoying the podcast. We're going to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors and some friends of the podcast.
Hi, this is Ray Szymanski, author of the Alien Shades of Greys trilogy, and you're listening to Wayne and Michelle on the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
Hi, I'm Greg Little, co-author of Origins of the God with England's Andrew Collins. It's a great book. It's about UFOs and the paranormal, and it gives an explanation. It's not what you think. And you are listening to Wayne and Michelle on the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
My name is Burton, and I am the host of Follow the Reaper podcast, where every episode we examine first and secondhand true paranormal encounters. And you're listening to Wayne and Michelle on the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
Hi, everyone. This is Jared Murphy of NotAliens.com, and you are listening to Wayne and Michelle from Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
Hey there, it's Richard Serrett, occasional weekend guest host of Coast to Coast AM and host of The Conspiracy Show, and you're listening to Wayne and Michelle's Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
What's up, everyone? This is Burton.
And Aaron from Lost in the Dark podcast.
And raise your horns because you're listening to Wayne and Michelle from the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
What is up, you guys? It's your girl Gemma Jade from Gemma Jade YouTube, Moon Bear Oracle, Paranormal Chop Shop. You're here listening to Wayne and Michelle with the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
Hi, this is Chris Lato of the Chris Lato YouTube channel, retired F-16 pilot turned UAP investigator, and you are listening to Wayne and Michelle on the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
Hi, this is Terry Lynn Keel, Director of MUFON Memberships, investigator, demonologist, and author of Alien Healing, the true story of a benevolent extraterrestrial. And you're listening to Wayne and Michelle on the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Michael Schratt, military aerospace historian and private pilot, and you are listening to Wayne and Michelle at the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast, and we're glad to have you with us today.
Hi, this is Sev Talk from MUFON, and the author of You Have the Right to Talk to Aliens, and the host of Alien Spirit TV with Sev on YouTube. You're listening to Wayne and Michelle at the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast.
What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? This is Big Willie with the UFO Garage Podcast, where we're all about UFOs, aliens, and all things weird. I also run a podcast, Band of Bearded Brothers, with my brother Micah, BOBB for short, and you are listening to Wayne and Michelle with the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters Podcast. So take a seat and buckle up as they educate us on all things woo.
That's what they got on Graham Hancock about, right? About being racist or something like that.
And the thing is, because there have been groups who have used that for racist, means, whereas Graham is taking the actual stuff from the native peoples and saying, this is what they're saying. How is this racist?
Yeah. I think telling an indigenous people that their cosmology and their mythology is wrong. Let us tell you how it is, as the educated academic white man. We're going to tell you what's real and what isn't. That's racist.
If you go to Graham's Twitter, he had a whole long thing he wrote. I think it was on his Twitter, refuting all those points.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually, that's a fairly new accusation that I hadn't heard. I didn't realize that there were so many people who were anti lost civilization because somehow they feel it's racist.
Well, it's because if I remember correctly, it's because of the whole Aryan race Nazi thing, because was it the Thule Society, or they had some kind of a secret society that was very much into finding these lost civilizations. So if anybody's interested in any kind of ancient civilization stuff, therefore, it's a horrible argument.
Yes. Yeah. And the Nazis were interested in anything they thought could give them an upper hand. But as far as the ancient civilizations, they wanted to prove that they came from the master race,
right?
Which were this white area, and they pretty much just invented a lot of that stuff. They took other stuff and twisted it, Blavatsky stuff and things like that, and twisted it to say what they wanted it to say.
What are your thoughts on cryptids?
Well, that goes back to our not having a reference frame. I think one of my this is more just a speculation, but if we were to wander through the woods and come across something that we have no reference frame for, just like a wandering bit of consciousness, our brain picks it up and goes, I don't know what that is. And then your brain goes, well, I've never seen this before. I'm scared. What am I scared of? Well, I'm scared of monsters. It must be a monster. So your brain then shows you a monster and you go, what the hell? And then you run away because there's a monster. And then no one else ever sees it again because it wasn't actually what it looked like. It's just our brain filling in something to put in that spot. Because a lot of cryptids tend to be like one-off type of things. As far as Bigfoot and all those, I think some of this stuff is co-created. Like it takes its form from us. Like we see it as something. So then suddenly you get a flap of that very thing and other people start seeing the same thing because now they have a reference frame.
What about like Chupacabra? Because haven't they found that it's basically some type of a species that should not exist, and they've killed them down in Texas?
No, the ones in Texas, I think, were mostly mangy coyotes.
Okay.
Yeah, the original Chupacabra is very alien-ish, but again, it seems like something that could have been a co-creation sort of thing. Like there was there's something with blood. If you use blood in magic, it's effective. And And for some reason, this stuff responds to blood as well. So, it was drinking the blood of goats. That was, chupacabra, I think, means goat sucker.
Yeah.
So, but what it really was, I don't know. It's not like anyone's ever caught one. Every time they've caught one, it's basically a mangy, coyote or something to that effect.
I do know that I don't know what show it was on, but there was a show and a woman had a ranch and her chickens were being drained of blood. The neighbor hit an animal with the car and it turned out to be what they were calling the chupacabra. And they said it was some kind of a species of like a rare northern Mexican wolf mixed with a coyote. That's what okay. Does that make sense then?
Yep. Yeah. Something to that effect. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there are things out there that we
certainly, I just talked to Travis Watson, and in his not his latest book, but his second latest book about Canadian monsters, he talks. I think it's the woolly bison. These are giant bison that we thought were extinct. And one day someone's flying over some part of Canada and they're like, oh my God, look, it's woolly bison, a whole ton of them. And these things had existed this whole time and nobody knew. And they're giant animals. It's just they were out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating.
And there's
I haven't heard of that.
There's a book I cannot remember the name of. And the guy's name is difficult to remember as well, unfortunately. But it's basically a book on cryptids that have been proven to be real animals.
Well,
wish I had more info than that, but that's
I know,
all
right?
I can remember.
Thylacine, wasn't that like the Tasmanian tiger, and it was more related to like a kangaroo than.
Well, that was thought to be extinct. That wasn't something we didn't think existed, but there's questions of whether or not it still exists. You had the fish there. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of stuff deep in the ocean that we just have no clue about because we don't explore it.
Well, you hit up on something, and it was the magic word, and I heard you talking a little bit about this in ages and ages and ages ago. My first wife, she was a practicing witch, a pagan. Not my current wife. She gets called a witch and probably a lot of other things, more worse than that.
And it better not be from him if he wants to sleep through the night. Really? Nice.
But I know you're a big metalhead, so am I. And I was just wondering, what is your thoughts of like metal music? And these all seem to go together with heavy metal music. And I know we're taking like a totally different turn here, but when you brought up magic, it's like, okay, there's always been this mysticism around heavy metal music, the dark face paint, corpse paint, the occult, Satanism, this dark and gritty stuff. So this is very open-ended. What's your take on this? And if you're talking about co-creating and we can co-create these things, what are they trying to co-create? What's going on here, man? It doesn't seem like it should be all that good.
Well, it depends. Like, when you look at like early Venom, they're one of the first black metal bands. They were all about Satan. They also weren't all that talented, but they were doing something that was really flying in the face of everyone else. Like this was, there was a shock value to that.
Yeah, I always thought of it as like the big middle finger from middle finger from like the metal heads, like, screw your conformity. That's kind of like the age I grew up in the 80s and stuff with, Megadeth and Metallica and Iron Maiden and Venom.
They didn't. Yeah, Venom is the only one there that really had like any kind of religious overtones.
Right?
Satan and all the other stuff. Merciful Fate. I mean, King Diamond had a legitimate interest in that stuff. The rest of the band didn't. But of course, King was the one that kind of pushed all that stuff forward and matured a lot with it. Like when early on, it was just kind of a shock value thing. But
my middle daughter's named Abigail for a reason.
Nice. But like, King Diamond's solo stuff, he doesn't really have the satanic imagery as much, like it's more horror stories.
Right.
And he has what's his name? I'm blanking. Lyle is a Bigfoot researcher. Lyle Blackburn is literally neighbors with King Diamond. He's like one of his he's a close friend of his. And he was telling me that King has a very strong spiritual path, but he doesn't really talk about it or share it. Martin Popoff just re-released his book on Merciful Fate, and some of the early stuff in there is interesting, where King's talking about some of his weird experiences, and way ahead of his time, talking about how he doesn't know what this stuff is, so he's not going to define it. Like, these things happen, and he's not going to like put a label on it because he's afraid it's going to limit whatever he's experiencing. And I saw that, went, wow, you're about 20 years, 30 years ahead of your time here.
Yeah, well, when I first was listening to Merciful Fate and King Diamond, it was like I started to become interested in numbers because, him and, 18 is actually dying. And I'm like, where's he getting this from? And then I started digging into it. And I'm like, well, now I know 9 is my favorite number. All the cool things you can do with 9.
So I think a lot of the bands are just, it's a fun thing for them. They're casually interested in it. They feel, I mean, it varies band to band, but I think a lot of them are just like, it's fun. It's, they're rebelling, they're doing whatever. Because if you look at something like the Satanic Temple, it's not even, I mean, even though they're technically a religious group, they're not so much a religion as a sort of more a socio-political type of group, with using Satan just as the opposite of everything our culture has come to be. And even Anton LaVey, when he started the Church of Satan, it wasn't like, yes, this is about being evil. It's about, if that's, he was a crime scene photographer, and he would see these people go and commit these heinous crimes and then go to church on Sunday and get forgiven for them. And he was like, well, if that's what, Catholicism is about, then I want the opposite. I want something that holds you responsible for your actions. And so he created the Church of Satan, kind of tongue in cheek, but then it caught on. So now you have the Satanic Temple, who have evolved that, and they're pushing for, individual freedoms and things like that, and respecting other people's belief systems, which a lot of religions, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of religions, especially the fundamentalist ends of them, do not do. So, the term Satan becomes that of rebelling against the accepted traditions, in a sense.
Well, where does magic come into all this? And you talked a little bit about, in this episode I was listening to, as a matter of fact, just today, something to do with chaos magic. What is that kind of all about, and how does that fit into all of this stuff? Is this part of that co-creating? Are you able to do certain things that can bring in this stuff? Or
so chaos magic is sort of the opposite end of ceremonial magic. So ceremonial magic, the more traditional form of magic, is very much like, okay, here's what you do, here's how you do it. You have to have these things on hand. You have to pray to these entities, so on and so forth. Chaos magic says, okay, it doesn't really matter what you're praying to, like you just need to get the core of it right. And the core of it comes down to things like meditation and focus and being able to release that stuff as well, because whatever changes you make to reality happen on an unconscious level. You're not doing it consciously unless you're physically doing something. Crowley would define magic as anything you did that manipulated reality, which included picking up a glass. It's low magic, but it's magic because you're manipulating reality. High magic would be contacting what he called the holy guardian angel, which is really your higher self. So magic is the aim to change things that you can't just reach out and changing things on another level. And you do that by affecting your unconscious mind, which, if we are creating reality, it's coming from our unconscious. And the difference with chaos magic is that you sort of strip down all the pomp and circumstance out of it and go with what works for you. You don't worry about following a particular tradition.
Is vision boards and things like The Secret, do you think that falls into that category of magic manifesting?
Vision boards like Ouija boards?
No, like, if you want to have $1 million at some point, or you want to have a lot of money, you make a poster board and you put everything that represents pictures of money, on that stuff. And are you manipulating, is the point to manipulate the universe without you really knowing it to bring those into existence?
I mean,
it was like a big Oprah thing. I don't know how
yeah,
we got to like.
I know what The Secret is and stuff. I just didn't like the vision boards. So that's kind of like the surface level of doing magic. Like if you take all the substance away, that's what you're left with. Oh, if you just really want something really bad, but it doesn't really work like that. I think people get convinced it works like that because they may be working a little bit of magic, but how many of those people are millionaires? Probably none. But if you focus, if you just focus your stuff on, focus yourself on something, yeah, you're probably going to be able to achieve it, but you're going to have to work for it. Magic doesn't just hand you things. You can't just manipulate reality to be what you want it to be. That would make life kind of uninteresting, really. You would just have what you wanted whenever you wanted it. It's kind of, right. I think it would just be boring. Life is meant to be a challenge. For whatever reason, we're here to learn how to overcome those challenges. Or we're just playing a big video game that's really challenging. One of the two. But you figure even people who have a lot of money, how many millionaire musicians and stuff have killed themselves because they were unhappy.
Right. I'm thinking like Kurt Cobain and
the guy from Soundgarden.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but that's a different conspiracy theory too, but we won't talk about that.
Right.
And also the one singer from Linkin Park.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, Bennington.
Yeah.
Or Robin Williams.
Yeah, that was Chris Cornell. That was Soundgarden. But you're right though. You hear about these people being successful and they're the most unhappy people in the world.
Yeah. Not all of them, but a lot of them. It because it changes your life in a way that you can't connect to people as easily. You probably can't trust people as easily because you never know who's just using you.
Yeah.
There's like if I don't necessarily want to be rich, but if I could make enough money to pay my bills, I'd certainly be a lot happier.
Like your way of thinking.
I could easily pay my bills every month and not have to worry about it. Yeah, it's going to make me much happier than I am now.
Right.
But I don't need to be a millionaire. If I was a millionaire, I'd probably give a lot of it away.
Yeah, well, I don't know, man. The way the house market's going, if you want a decent house, you're going to spend a lot of that million.
That's true. That is very true. Upkeeping a house gets really expensive. But as far as stuff like The Secret, that's kind of just one of those things that it's like, yeah, it's taking stuff that has substance, making it really simplistic, and then trying to market it to people.
That's putting it in the realm of like the mainstream pop culture kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Somebody with a production company or something got wind of this and said, "Hey, let's make this like a documentary."
Oh yeah, yeah.
What about alchemy? Are we in the same realm when it comes to magic and things like that with alchemy?
Sort of. Alchemy's changing.
Is that a science?
So it started out. Things like chemistry and stuff like that started with alchemy. But like alchemy too, the more esoteric sides of alchemy are about changing yourself. It's not about changing, lead into gold. That's sort of a metaphor. Although I'm sure there were people trying to turn lead into gold because, why wouldn't you? But like in the esoteric world, alchemy has more of a self-awareness sort of thing. Getting to know yourself, working on yourself, evolving yourself, Jacques Vallée has shown some of his more recent interviews talks about the UFO stuff being alchemical in a sense. And I think a lot of the UFO stuff holds a lot in common with like shamanic practices. I think we're seeing something that is possibly trying to wake us up to who we really are, but it's being hijacked by our culture.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. If you look at everything that we are like electronically addicted to, I mean, the distraction devices of phones, the constant bombarding of the signals of, Wi-Fi signals and all that, you can't tell me that these things are not doing stuff to the human body.
Absolutely.
And it's see, to me, that's exactly kind of what the world has kind of been set up to. And it almost seems like, with the cell phones and the internet and the mass distractions, it almost seemed like it happened overnight, to where Michelle and I, being teachers, we see the effect of what these cell phones and, what they have on the kids. I mean, it's really, really bad to see a kid that's been, raised with a cell phone like a little cyborg from the age of 5. And then we have to deal with, IEPs about a child who's ADHD, but yet the parents are sending them into the school with a damn cell phone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's reliance on the stuff. It's not that the technology is bad in itself. It's the fact that we're so reliant on it. And when kids are raised on this stuff, they lack social finesse. They become crippled by that reliance.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we all are to some degree. I mean, because we're just used to using our phones for everything.
Oh yeah, we're paying bills, we're booking flights, we're
look something up.
It's a good tool. They're good tools.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's just when the tool becomes the master is the problem.
Exactly. And I always find it amusing how often teachers, when I was growing up, would say, well, it's not like you're going to have a calculator in your pocket when you grow up. No, we're going to have a full out computer.
Yeah, fair enough. We got more computing power in our pocket than what took people to the moon.
Right.
It's amazing.
It's like we're going to be able to find your personal photos on your social media and airdrop them to all our friends while you're teaching class.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and that there's, because everything's available at your fingertips, it changes the way that kids develop.
That's a big thing, the brain development.
And also being, like anything sexual is so easy to find online. So if you're, a kid, you can just look up whatever you want. Most of those sites will just say, are you 18? Yes. Okay, fine. You can come in, and they're being numb to this stuff.
Yeah. And they don't have to worry about dealing with relationships at all, whether, sexual or not sexual. It's how do you deal with people? And all they have is like this little black screen in their hand that they interact with, and they don't interact with real people.
Yeah, exactly. Or they interact only through that little black screen. Right. So you're dealing with real people, but you're not, it lacks all the social cues and stuff.
Yeah. My wife teaches mythology as part of her.
I have a degree in theater. And one of the things that I noticed too is like the lack of being able to make eye contact. We were talking about interpersonal connections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and the fact that you go to have a conversation now with a student, they're looking off to the left, they're looking to the right, they're looking down, they're looking up. They will sustain eye contact for less than 5 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say, with you teaching mythology, there's the whole new hieroglyphs, the emojis.
Oh, yeah.
Where I've seen people have like whole conversations just using these new 2020 emojis.
I'm becoming quite good at that myself.
See? Yeah. Well, we can thank Twitter, because if you want to say something, you better do it in 140 characters or less.
Yeah, talk about encouraging short attention spans.
Yes. Or only reading headlines and news articles. People make up their mind as soon as they read a headline. They don't care about the substance.
And the headlines are almost always misleading. They're almost, if they're not out and out clickbait, they're like, so I live in New York State. And there was one that popped up that said, this is the first January that New York State stayed above freezing for the entire month of January. And I went, well, that's BS. It was below freezing here. And I clicked on the article and it's like in the Hudson Valley. Oh, okay. So your New York State apparently just consists of the Hudson Valley. All right, great.
Hey, have you ever had Graham Hancock on your show?
I have not. I've talked to Graham.
Okay.
I've never had him on the show.
What about Randall Carlson? I thought I heard you say you had Randall
I've
on.
had Randall on from long before he was associated with Graham.
Okay.
I had actually heard, maybe in my first couple of years I had him on. I had heard him on Red Ice Radio talking about all this stuff. And I was like, who the hell is this guy? I need this guy on my show.
Oh my God. You bring up Red Ice Radio. Years and years ago, I think I had stumbled upon that show and they yanked it. Didn't they take? No, the whole show, Red Ice Radio.
Okay. Well,
wasn't he out of Sweden or something?
He was out of Sweden. I think he left Sweden, but he went, he started having a lot of like Holocaust deniers on and things like that. So a lot of places and that became his focus rather than like the paranormal stuff. Like when I was listening to it, he had Graham Hancock on, Robert Schoch, Micah Hanks, like ufologists, ancient, civilization people, and he did really good interviews. But it got more and more political as time went on, and it got very extreme right with some of it. And that's where I stopped listening, and I think he got pulled off of a lot of services because of it.
So if you were given one opportunity to study one of these topics in this whole wide, like ufology, cryptids, ancient civilizations, all of that, you look at all of this stuff and you were given an opportunity, look, Seriah, you get $2 million to pursue whatever you want, but it can only be one thing. What would you pursue?
I don't know, because I would probably say UFOs, just because I think UFOs are probably the more pure version of whatever we're experiencing. But I think it's all connected, so I don't know where to draw those lines. So if you're investigating a UFO sighting that then also has a Bigfoot sighting attached to it, do you just ignore the Bigfoot? Because that's what we've been doing up to this point.
I heard somebody talking about this not too long ago. Like people that are looking into Bigfoot, if they see something that they think might be like spiritual, ghost related or whatever, they won't report it. Or if it's a UFO, if they see a UFO, though people have said that it seems like Bigfoot and UFO sightings go hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, Timothy Renner, I kind of shook him of the flesh and blood idea for Bigfoot by pointing out the poltergeist activity. And then when he talked to Bigfoot witnesses, he would ask them, have you ever seen any weird lights in this area? Have you, did anything else weird happen? And almost every single time they'd be like, oh yeah, but what does it have to do with Bigfoot?
Yeah. And you know what, you bring that up, and we recently had on the state director of MUFON for Michigan here, because we did a whole series of interviews with Jack Bouchon and the whole Unsolved Mysteries, Something in the Skies, about the 1994 Western Michigan UFO flap that they have the radar data. Yeah. So we had both of them on, and that was one thing Bill said as well, when they would go out and look at these UFO sightings, and they would have people say, oh, and by the way, we've seen ghosts in our house, or and it seems to be almost like a generational thing, which makes me think, okay, is that the land, the food you guys are eating together? Is it a genetic connection? All the above? What's going on here?
That, and that's a really good question. My favorite story for that is when I had Seth Breedlove on talking about, I think it was the Minerva monster. No, it was the one in New York State. I can't remember if that was the Minerva. I think that was Beast of Whitehall. Maybe that's what it was. And, this is a Bigfoot encounter, but a lot of it, it's like rocks being thrown on this house and stuff. And I'm like, and I'm going to him, so poltergeist activity. He's like, well, but, monkeys throw rocks too. I'm like, right. But what you're describing, if you take the Bigfoot sightings out, because people actually saw a beast at different times, but the poltergeist activity happened separately. And I'm like, so they're experiencing poltergeist activity. And I'm like, was there a UFO report? And he kind of paused for a minute. He's like, well, a UFO landed on the lawn of the neighbor across the street around the same time. He's like, but I don't see how that's connected. And I'm like, and this is why we don't know these things are connected, because they get left out, because it's like, well, what do space aliens have to do with this, ape in the woods? Well, it's probably not an ape in the woods, and they're probably not space aliens.
Yep. Wow. Yeah,
But
I just wonder.
Yeah, and I mean, that's part of the problem with the last 100 years of research, is that we don't know very important things like what else was going on, like was there any other weirdness in these sightings, because most researchers didn't record it. They only recorded what they were looking for.
It's almost like they self-compartmentalized.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a ufologist. That means I don't look at anything else but UFOs.
Not only that, but liminal states play a big part in this stuff. So what was going on in someone's life when they had an unusual encounter turns out to be very important. My big UFO sighting happened at like one of the biggest changes in my life.
I was just going to ask you about like what is one of your top sightings or whatever paranormal experiences you had.
Oh God, that gets weird. But the UFO, I saw a huge UFO over Cayuga Lake. The thing was gigantic. I was going to my radio show at the time. I pulled over and I watched it slowly descend into the lake. And I was like, okay, that was enormous and blinding and all this. And I noted everything down. And then I think I was talking to Mike Cleland, and Mike goes, what was going on in your life at the time? I'm like, I don't know. I've taken notes actually since 1990. And I went back and I looked at when that UFO sighting happened, and I went, oh, like I had just gotten out of a very important relationship. I started a new job. The radio station had just switched buildings, and a bunch of other stuff was happening. I'm like, so a huge shakeup of my life just happened, and then I saw a giant UFO. And so I've been working on an autobiography, and as I'm going through, and I'm going, yep, not only do the weird things that happen to me tend to happen in packs, in little flaps of activity, but they also tend to happen around the time things are shifting or are stressful in life. So this is another question that no one's been asking people for the last 100 years, which is a simple one of what was going on in your life at the time.
You could probably find that stress is a good motivator for these things.
Stress can definitely bring on PK energy. So if someone suddenly starts having a poltergeist, my first question is, so what's going on? Are you really stressed out? And almost always they're like, well, yeah, all this stuff is happening. It's like, there's your poltergeist. I mean, there may be a something out there that's taking that energy from them and using it, or they're just projecting it outward because that's how they're dealing with the stress.
See, then this makes me think of, because I'm very interested in people like Wim Hof, Stig Severinsen, David Goggins, these people who can push their bodies to do amazing things when they shouldn't be able to, based on like the power of their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help but to go and think about, where could we really be as a people? And especially if we get into one of these solar activity cycles.
Right.
Seems like the sun's doing some weird things lately. It makes me wonder, are we really more like caged rats that are not allowed to really explore our full potential? I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot more out there that As long as we're kept fat, dumb, and happy, and we're making money and paying taxes and keeping the system going, the less human we are.
True. And I don't know if it's even by design. I think it's just the way things have come about because they've been so materialistic. You know, we for a long time, at least 100 years now, we've shunned anything that's not material. You know, science has decided that all that exists is the material universe, so we don't have to worry about anything else.
Yeah, until you ask them about how much space there is in atoms and and then they try to convince you that, the desk that's sitting in front of you is solid, but it's really made up of empty space.
Sure. Well, it's all vibration. Everything's vibration. And that may be where some of these things come from, is a different vibratory state that we can't normally access. And they start moving into one that we can interact with, or we become more sensitive to that state. Most of these encounters, no matter what they are, involve lights, whether they be cryptids, Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts. Lights are one of the most common things you see running through all this. And that could be the first sort of movement into our visible spectrum of these things.
You bring up lights, and when Michelle and I saw this gigantic triangle that was at the intersection of a freeway we had to get on here in Southwest Detroit area, and we were just, I don't know, maybe 18 miles north of Detroit Metro Airport. And when I first saw these three bright lights, I thought it was an airliner getting ready to crash. It was at 2:30 in the morning. So not a lot of cars out, but it's a busy part of the suburb of Detroit. And I saw these bright lights. I'm like, oh, those are landing lights. This is not going to be good. That's a huge airliner coming down. That's all you could see were the lights. As we got closer to it, I noticed the lights weren't really moving much at all. As we got closer, Michelle was like, when did our military get something like that? And I said, that's not our military. It was a gigantic, it had to be about 300 feet on a side, black triangle hovering there. I want to say maybe 150 feet off the ground or so. I mean, I'm a trained observer. I was in the military. I was in the infantry. So you learn how to.
It was right at the tops of the trees.
Yeah, it was like at the tops of the trees and the buildings that were there. But the funny thing was, well, there's a lot of funny things, but the lights, there was a light in each one of the corners, like an orb, and it was so damn bright, but it did not illuminate anything around it. And it was really, really bizarre. And have you ever heard of these things being very bright lights, but then nothing, no trees, nothing on the ground was being illuminated at all?
Yep. That is actually very common.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the one I saw didn't seem to be illuminating anything, but it was so, when I was driving along the road and I thought someone was driving up from the lake with their brights on because it was blinding me. And I was like, whoa, come on, what the hell? Turn your brights off. And then it kept going. It didn't stop. And I'm like, okay, how am I still being blinded? And I kind of squinted through it and went, what the hell am I looking at? And so I pulled over and I'm like watching the thing, and there's no noise. There was no Oz effect. There was no weird, anything. It was just normal. But the thing was so bright, but nothing was lit up because of it. And I couldn't actually see if there was, it looked like the lights were in a solid formation and there was some spinning around it that gave it the illusion of there being an object there, but I couldn't actually see an object because all I could see were the lights.
That's interesting that you say that, because we got very close to the thing, because I heard a voice in my head that said, you don't belong here. Get away from here. Get away from here. And I was instantly terrified. Like, I don't know what the voice was or anything. And I am not usually a person that gets easily like freaked out about things. And I was instantly just like, we're gunning it. And Michelle's got the window down. She's like, it's not making any noise. It's just kind of sitting there. And as we drove we pretty much went under like the side of it, if I'm remembering correctly, almost under it. And I looked up out of the driver's side and I couldn't really see the body because the whole thing looked like a heat mirage. Like heat coming off a blacktop in the summer. I couldn't make out any details, but I could tell there was a body. There was a structure there, but it was all wavery and with those three lights going. And then it was just like, okay, we're getting out of here. Then the thing rotated and then moved parallel along the freeway with us. And then we lost sight of it for maybe a couple seconds. And then when we came back out of the sound abatement area and we look over on the freeway where it should have been, it was just gone. And then people were telling us, yeah, we saw something like that 20 miles to the west near Ann Arbor. And, you know, these reports kept coming into us about people who had seen that. And it was the most, it totally rocked my world as to, okay, there's sci-fi and all of this stuff, but what the hell is this? And I cannot, through normal logical means, explain what it was. There was nothing aerodynamical about it. There was no sound. But any logical means that I can say, okay, it was our military and they're testing a huge craft over a populated area within the busy airspace of Detroit Metro Airport, just to the south. That makes no sense. It's not something that we have. It's not us doing that.
Well, it could be. It could be because they would do that because it would get dismissed as a UFO report. I mean, it doesn't mean that that's what it was, but I could see them doing that to see what the perception of it was, how many people report it, things like that. We do. I mean, giant triangles are something we do have. What year was this?
This was 2018.
Okay, yeah. So I mean that
March.
That's within, you know, well within the time period that it could have been us, but it seems like there are also genuine anomalous stuff that looks the same way, where you almost have to wonder if the military copied it.
Right.
And there's also this, and I've talked about this before. There are ads now that you can focus on a person standing in a certain spot. So this, the one I grabbed to save, it says this anti-child abuse ad helps kids speak out by displaying a message only they can see. So the bulletin board was only visible to children. They've had movie posters that if you stand in a certain place in front of them, it will speak to you, but only if you're standing in a very specific spot. So this tech exists. And if they're using it on commercial applications or, you know, to help stop child abuse or whatever, that means the military and other corporate entities have probably had it for decades. But, you know, the thing is, like, even if what you saw was military, it opened you up to realizing there's other things out there.
It sure did.
No joke about that.
Yeah. I mean, for both of us, I mean, it was 2:30 in the morning. We're just trying to drive home from a late night dose of bingo with the old ladies, you know, and they get full contact bingo going, you know, with those $1,000 progressive
not
pots.
full contact bingo.
I call it full contact because when you start winning bingo with those old ladies around you, they start drawing daggers and stuff.
They're going to hear you using the word old, and you'll not have to worry about the daggers.
Almost officially old. I mean, but age is just a number. You know.
That is true.
All right. Well, you know, Seriah, this has been awesome. We've been going over an hour, almost an hour and a half, and just got a couple other quick little questions for you. Sure. Do you have any ties to Michigan at all?
We always ask this question.
Other than a couple of my co-hosts coming from there. I believe Ren lives in Michigan.
Oh, okay.
And, Taylor, I think, lives in Michigan. Where does Aaron Gullius? I might also be Michigan.
And where are you located? Are you Pennsylvania?
I am dead center of New York State.
Oh, New York State. Okay.
Rojan from Project Archivist is in Michigan. So I know a lot of people in Michigan.
All right, so you definitely have
So
ties to
therefore you
Michigan.
have ties to
Yes.
Michigan.
I don't have any direct ties. Like I've never been there or anything like that, but I know a lot of people I know come from Michigan.
Yeah. Well, we have some very interesting sightings around here, and I think it has a lot to do with like our water, or the very deep freshwater lakes that we have around us.
Entirely possible.
Yeah.
Water definitely seems to be one of the factors that I mean, it's hard to say because water's everywhere.
Yeah.
But water seems to have an effect on our environment and our perception of the paranormal that is there's something to it. It's hard to quite navigate down what it is, but there's something there.
Yep, I agree. And just to wrap things up here, why don't you go ahead and like plug your show? Any books you've worked on, or upcoming speaking engagements, or shows you're going to be releasing soon? Anything like that?
Well, Where Did the Road Go is wheredidtheroadgo.com, and that's every single week. 10 years, I've never missed a week. There are times where there's been more than one show a week, but there's been at least one show every week. If you like metal, especially if you want to hear newer, or even older, more obscure stuff, that's my show, The Last Exit for the Lost, which is thelastexit.org. And that is also every week, and has been, I think I've missed maybe 3 or 4 weeks in the almost 29 years I've done this, all weather related. I am working on a couple of books, but they're not going to be out for a while. There's a documentary coming out probably in the next month or so. That'll be info will be on Where Did the Road Go stuff. All my social media stuff is there. Let's see. Yeah, no speaking engagements at the moment. I think that's about it, really.
Any chance you're heading down to Asheville to go to the Cosmic Summit?
I was just going to ask that.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, with Randall and Graham, and it's all about their research into ancient civilizations and catastrophes and stuff.
And Graham Hancock's going to be there.
Yeah,
and Randall Carlson.
You just say Graham. It's just Graham.
Just Graham.
People that know Graham, it's just Graham. He's such a cool dude, and I've got my flight and hotel and everything booked to go down there. So I'm just really excited to get down there and be at one of these conventions and see these guys. I'm very stoked about it, because the ancient civilizations and the high tech, hypothesis, and all of the evidence that's all around, from tubular drills and all of this stuff all around the world, pyramids all around the world. There's something that was going on.
Yeah, the sonic technology I find very interesting, because the thing is, a lot of skeptics, the debunking skeptics, will say, well, we're the Coke cans. It's like, it doesn't mean they had an advanced society like ours.
Right.
Graham repeatedly says, I'm not talking about some space age society. I'm talking about a seafaring civilization, which is not that crazy of a claim. They might have been more advanced, but there also could be numerous advanced civilizations that have been wiped off the face of the planet.
Yeah, and you won't find any trace of them other than things that would stick around, like stone.
Right. And if we all there was a show on Discovery or something like years ago called Earth Without People or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And they postulate what would happen if everyone disappeared tomorrow. And within 10,000 years, there would be no trace of us left, except for the pyramids, the Great Pyramids, and possibly the Hoover Dam. Everything else would be gone.
Yep.
So if there was a civilization here 100,000 years ago, the chances of us finding anything from that are slim to none. But it's not just finding it, it's also recognizing it, because it could be a civilization so different from the way ours developed that it wouldn't look anything like what we would expect it to look like.
Well, and nobody's ever come up with a good explanation for those amazing vase, the granite vases and the boxes, like Saqqara.
Yeah.
Yep. The precision in those things. I mean, you're going to tell me a pounding stone and a chisel, a copper chisel? No. I just
not only that, but these civilizations pop up fully formed with all this tech and then slowly lose it.
Yeah. How is that possible? Like, we've gotten better over the last 100 years with our technology. You know, you're supposed to progress on top of your technology. How did like the ancient Egyptians have all of this stuff to be able to do the Great Pyramid of Giza and everything and then kind of fade away?
Because they were being taught by someone else that must not have shared that except among certain people.
Yep.
And eventually that got lost. So they were still building pyramids, and they're still impressive structures, but they're not the Great Pyramid.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can tell like when the work gets, very shoddy as time goes on. Yeah. So, all right, man, this has been awesome. And we'll have to catch up again and do this again and have you come on, man. It would be awesome. And, absolutely love to talk to you again, but we're going to go ahead and wrap this up for the night and, get ready to go to work tomorrow. So
4:30 comes early.
Yes, I'm sure.
All right, man. Well, thank you very much yet again for coming on the podcast, and want to thank you for joining us, man. Have a good night.
Thank you, Seriah.
Absolutely.
Well, Michelle, that was a very interesting interview. Man, there was so much to talk about. He had so much knowledge. It was hard to stick to one thing, and just wanted to throw a lot at him for this first appearance on our podcast. I mean, what'd you think?
It's like, go to the left, we start talking about this. It's like, I'm ready to talk about paranormal. Oh, let's kind of turn this way. We're going to start talking about heavy metal. So we definitely need to get him on the live, because Burton would have a blast.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. I've always been interested in the whole metal scene when it comes to their involvement with occult or secretive knowledge and magic and things like that, just because I guess that music style lends itself well.
Here's the thing. This man's got some stories to tell, and we did not have him on long enough. So that is definitely... this is going to be an interview that gets continued.
Yeah, there's going to have to be a part 2 here. So, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. We're going to cut it short here.
Remember, head on over to Linktree.
Yep. Check out our links. If you want to help support the podcast, you just click on that Linktree link. It'll take you to a PayPal, buy us a coffee.
Michelle always needs coffee.
Our merchandise store link, and all kinds of other ways you can help out the podcast if you choose to do so. All right, Michelle, I think we should get out of here. Let's make it official.
It's time for the weekend, folks. So we're going to bid you adieu.
Adieu?
Adieu. Quit raising your eyebrows like that.
All right, everybody, we're out of here. And remember, keep your eyes to the sky.
You have been listening to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast. You can reach us at mi.ufo.podcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter at mi_UFO and join our Facebook group by searching for Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters. So until next time.